Hello and welcome to Sugar, Silk and Stretch, a unique boxing podcast brought to you exclusively by Ace Podcast Nation. My name is Ben Doughty.
Hi, I'm Gary Stretch, and the Silk is on the run at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, in all seriousness, I don't think we'll take the piss out of him too much because there was actually something quite serious circumstance which waylaid him, I believe, this weekend. We were, as you know, Gary, hoping to have Alton Murkison, who's the trainer of Roy Jones Jr. But it's not Alton that can't make it tonight, as I understand it. It's the Silk who can't be here, and he doesn't want to miss out on it because it was his guest in the first place. And you can imagine he'd go mad if we did the interview with such a luminary on our own, you know.
Right. That's a bit
But
of history with Murkison.
Well, you had
Well,
had some history. With
I went to Vegas to train with him, and he was sick. So I showed up. Bob Arum put me up at the Excalibur to meet, and I go to the top-ranked gym to meet Murkison. So it was my first time like staying in Vegas. I went to the gym on my own, didn't know anyone. I had my little bag. I put my luggage in the hotel. I went to the gym, and I stood there, and Murkison wasn't there. And basically, he called and said, "Gary, I've got flu, and I don't want to get you sick." So I said, "No problem." He said, "Look, just do the floor, do this, do that, and give me a couple of days." And I said, "No problem." And Freddie Roach was there, and he came over and he said, "How are you?" and introduced himself. He said, "Do you want to do some mitts?" I got on the mitts with him. And then he said, "What are you doing for dinner?" I said, "Hey, let's go and have dinner." So we had dinner. I didn't know anyone. And so we went for dinner. And then he said, "What time are you running tomorrow?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Let's run at 6. And he said, "I'll meet you at the hotel." He met me in the hotel, put me in the car, drove me to a place where we run. And then I ran, and he had the windows open. He had a white Lincoln, I'll never forget, with the windows down with music on. And I ran behind the car, and it was fantastic, music and running. And Freddie must have been deaf. He had the music so loud in the car, but I could hear it. And then we did that, had breakfast, went back to the gym, trained again. And after about 3 days with him, I said, "Okay, I'm going to stay with Freddie." And I stayed with Freddie.
So basically, you were supposed to be you were on a promise with Murkison, and Freddie seduced you and poached you.
Yeah.
Sounds like, yeah.
Yeah.
That would, that's going to be interesting when Murkison does, when we do get the interview, which I believe is next week. Assuming that you're on that one as well, that'd be quite an interesting.
I wonder if he even remembers, but that was my story, So
Gary probably sees it as the one that got away. I mean, he could have changed his life, and in the end, he wound up with a duffer like Roy Jones instead.
Roy was with him at the time.
Yeah, no doubt.
I remember looking at this kid, young guy. I think he was like a welterweight. He looked like, but he was in the gym, and I remember I'm watching him shadowbox and thinking, "He's tasty, this guy."
Yeah,
and he became Roy Jones Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Roy was a light middleweight in the Seoul Olympics, as you'll remember.
Well,
Our own Richie Woodall boxed him and lost in the quarterfinal, but with credit, everybody knows it was the worst. I think it probably was certainly the most high-profile robbery in amateur boxing history, and it's one of the worst decisions of amateur or pro. I think you look at the Olympic final with the Park Si-hun, I believe his name was. You know what? It'd be interesting. I don't know if he can speak English. It'd be interesting to interview him today, Park Si-hun. That's one I'd like to do, provided he can speak English, but he probably can't. But so Gary, before we talk about next weekend, we have the Canelo Munguia fight coming up. I suppose it's only fair. The Silk wouldn't have allowed this, or he would have tried to impede it, shall we say? But I'm a more fair, neutral guy, as you know. So I think it's only fair you get your moment in the sun because you're pretty good at picking upsets for some reason. You've always been a jammy git in life generally, and I think you want to say a few things because you were the only one of us who picked Ryan Garcia to do a number on Devin Haney.
I was so pissed off, Ben, because I was trying to get a bet on. I was in Bulgaria and I went on a bunch of sites and they wouldn't let me. Said, "You're not in the area." I don't know why. Because at 5-1, you know what I mean? It was crazy, I thought.
6 or 7 even somewhere.
Yeah, and I had him in my head. I was thinking, I kept thinking points. I kept thinking everyone doesn't think he'll beat me on points, but I think he'll beat him. I think he'll win most of the rounds. I thought in my gut. And so I couldn't get, and that would have been like 20-1 or something. But anyway, I couldn't get a bet on. Sure, I had a punt, my boxing brain like yours, and you're an educated guy, Ben. I respect your boxing savvy. And you know, the logical would have been on Haney, but I had a funny feeling Garcia, and the weight I think was an issue. People ask, is it an issue? Well, it's an issue if you're having trouble with it, you know.
Exactly, Gary. And the thing is, the Silk says it isn't, by the way. And I'm going to mention an anomaly about the Silk's thinking on weight to you, because we had another debate on my page the other day about one of his contrarian views that he has. But he says it isn't, Gary. But as you've said before, and I've said before, why have
Massive.
weight divisions at all? Why have weight divisions at all if you're not going to abide by them? To me, I think Garcia's getting way too much credit in a way, because do you remember when Castillo, Jose? Sorry, do you remember when? Yeah, Jose Luis Castillo came in heavy and didn't make the weight for the Diego Corrales rematch. He knocked him
Right.
out in the fourth round, and everybody pretty much considered it null and void, Gary, at the time. They were like saying, "Now, you know, Diego won the fight that counted, albeit with controversy. You come in, you deliberately don't try to make the weight. You come in and chin the guy. That means nothing." And he never got any credit for it, Castillo. It was almost a stigma. Whereas Garcia is getting hailed as a genius, Gary, and so smart. He pretended to be nuts and emotionally unstable. He didn't make the weight. What a smart guy! Is that where we're at today in boxing?
No, I think there's no question. We know he's emotionally and mentally unstable. Period. Anyone who,
Uh-huh.
you know, he is the fact. I mean, that he's not 100%.
He's all over the place. Yeah.
All over the place. That's a guaranteed fact. He's not 100%, not a full shilling. But I do believe he has either got someone around him who's smart, could be Floyd, because I know he spent a lot of time with Floyd before the fight. I think that he did it. He took a punt and said, "Fuck the belt. Fuck the money, 50 or 1.5 million, whatever it's going to be. I'll make triple if I just beat him. Let's just get the win."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I believe he planned prior not to make the weight. I believe prior he didn't care about the belt. He knew that beating Haney gives him the key to the chocolate factory. And so he came in as strong and as big as he could. And I think he looked big and he looked strong and he looked like Haney looked tired at times because of, and that's weight, Ben, you know, when it's so different when you get down to weight, you do get exhausted. You recover, you're in great condition, but there's a strain on you.
And it's about him having to take himself to that place, which Garcia didn't have to and didn't try to. And that is more significant, right, than the fact that people are saying the weights on the night were apparently Haney was 165 and Garcia was 160. That's the most reliable account I've heard. But I imagine you're saying it doesn't make a difference at that point.
Well, that says a lot in itself, because if he's 160, that means he's real comfortable at one, you know, at 143. You know what I mean? Because he's gained some weight, but not crazy weight. But you can see the fact that Haney's gained more weight than him, how stripped he was at the weight.
Right, he was, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. I think Garcia played a very smart card, got the win, put himself in a great position. The one thing I wanted to discuss, Ben, was like the key factor in the fight. If you watch it, I mean, Haney had his moments, and
hang on. When you say moments, Gary, I think he won more rounds than Garcia did. I had it 7-4 and 1, right. But every round that Garcia won, he won it by 2 points at least. I even gave him a 10-7, but it had to become a 9-7 when he got the point docked. So he won his rounds so hugely. He won via the 10-point must system, even though I think he didn't win as many rounds.
No, like on a moral standpoint, watching the fight, if you'd have give it to Haney, it would have been crazy, like having got off the floor 5 times. And one thing I do have to comment on, like there was 3 or 4 knockdowns that weren't even counted.
They weren't, but the thing is, if you're scoring it, you're not allowed to override it. Suppose Gary stretched for
I understand that. But that was an issue.
Go what the referee gives him, you know.
Yeah, but that was an issue, wasn't it? I mean, there were knockdowns, some of them at least.
To be honest, Gary, because I was watching it in the heat of the moment and scoring it, I thought there were knockdowns, and I didn't realize. I didn't even catch up with that logic until a few rounds later. I didn't even realize. I was giving him the credit for the knockdowns because I thought he's definitely getting put over.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows a state of complete duress, and you know, to go down 3-4 times, whether you're off balance or not, it's like it's not normal. So he was obviously under amazing duress and stress, and so. But for sure, out of the 3 that they didn't call, one of them was a knockdown.
I think
least.
it was, and I think it's an interesting point you make. We all know Garcia can bang and he can punch like the devil with that left hook, and it's so quick, and it doesn't need any kind of. The Silk was saying today, he doesn't need a trigger for any wind up. He just pulls the trigger with that left hook. He doesn't seem to need to load it up. But I think but Haney did look very vulnerable around the whiskers as well. It was a combination of a big puncher and a guy who looked a bit chinny, right?
I always love your analogy, Ben. I think you're really good with breaking down fights. But when I actually tuned in when I couldn't make the show. I watched it later. I think I tuned in and sent you a message or two, didn't I, at the end? And then
you turned up. It was almost like a celebrity guest in the comments.
Yeah. But then I sent you a few messages. And then I rewatched the show. What I was amazed that no one talked about, which was a massive, massive turning point in the fight. It reminded me of Deontay Wilder in the fact that as soon as you put Haney on the back foot, he was lost, completely lost. When Garcia put him on the back foot, he just broke down completely. It was amazing. And then
when he put him in reverse, because one of my awkward pedantic things as well is I've got a different interpretation of back foot. I got it from my time at the reps, and for me, back foot is when you put the weight on the back foot, even if you're going forward. Some coaches, their whole raison d'etre is you've got to put your weight on your back leg. To me, once you're backing up, you're actually almost using the front foot to go backwards sometimes. So when you put him in reverse.
When he walked him down, let's say,
pushed him backwards.
When he pushed him backwards, he was completely fucked. Now I said to myself, well, Haney's a master boxer. He should love the back being pushed back. But then I revisited a few of his fights. He's never on his back foot. What he does is he claims the center of the ring, and then he boxes from the center with a long, stiff jab, and he moves lateral.
Which is what Floyd Mayweather did a lot, Gary. Floyd didn't. He could move and dance or run or whatever people want to call it. But Floyd likes to hold the center and dictate from there.
But when I was looking at Haney, I looked at it 3 or 4 fights. I never saw him on the back foot. He was either on the center of the ring, laterally, sideways, but never pushed back. When Garcia pushed him, he was completely fucking lost.
Fight going backwards. Yeah. I think you're right. I think sometimes people falsely ascribe the runner tag to boxers who weren't runners, like Floyd Mayweather is one. Even Pernell Whitaker. Pernell Whitaker was a defensive genius, but he would like to come forward. He liked to come forward and make, and look for his shots, So, and I think maybe Haney. Some people accuse Haney of being a weight bully because he rehydrated to 165, by the night on other occasions. And I guess this time he got a guy who couldn't weight bully, particularly since he hadn't decided to make the weight. Regardless of what they supposedly weighed on the night, Garcia certainly looked bigger. Looked more like Joe Calzaghe to me, in terms of build, really.
I've heard rumours, I don't know if they're true, about the breaking up with the dad as a trainer. But I tell you one thing, Ben, definitely the dad has done a great job promotionally. I'm sure he trains him to a degree well. I think Haney's been all around the world. I know Floyd's worked with him, and I know he's worked with a lot of trainers with his dad. Like they've gone to different gyms and they've sparred. He's been around a lot of quality. So, but for sure, for me, the lack of fight experience, I think a great corner, let's say he had Floyd in the corner with him, I think would have given him better advice to adjust during
and in the gym as well, in the gym maybe, because the Silk is saying that the one thing you're supposed to do as a coach ultimately is to try and help your fighter take away his opponent's assets, the best assets and best weapons. And we all know about Garcia and the left hook. And he's saying, if you can't deal with the left hook, what were you doing in camp? What was your trainer doing? And what was the advice they were giving you? Because that was why he found fault in it, because we knew that was going to be a problem. And he got tagged with the left hook just so often, didn't he?
Yeah. And there was the old seesaw jab that they all talked about when he put the arm back as he punched. Like the basic thing, the bare minimum with Garcia is you've got to have the backhand up, cover, to cover for the left hook.
Yeah, exactly.
And he never, throughout the whole fight, was never there. I mean, so, there was definitely fundamentals that whether he underestimated Garcia, whether he thought, but I mean, it was pretty obvious and evident, and everybody knows, and he's fought him 3 times, that left hook, trigger left hook, like you say, that doesn't come telegraphed. It just happens when it happens. You've got to be prepared for it the whole night because it's going to happen when you least expect it. So he's got to have a camp where he's constantly with the backhand up to
Yeah.
protect, and he didn't. He just disregarded it and got caught with it randomly.
So anyway, you called it. We didn't. It just suddenly occurs to me when I look at the top of left-hand side. We've been 15 minutes on this, and I wonder what we come in with this Canelo headline, then we start talking about a fight, not the weekend that's gone, but the one before. So, is there anything else you feel a bit like a judge here? Is there anything else you would like to add, Mr. Stretch, before we move on?
No, I'm moving on. Another notch
Yeah.
on the very notched belt. That's actually pushing my lead quite adversely into the.
You're winning. You're winning the competition quite. What I think we should do. I don't know what you think of this. I think we should wipe the boards clean at some point. We should have seasons so we get to all start from scratch again. Don't ask me why I feel that way. It just seemed like a good idea.
Well, look, if you do season one, then we can go back to square one again.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
Raymond Hale just said, I just feel Ben was too emotionally invested to be a head trainer. I don't know who he means when he says Ben. I think he might mean Bill. Bill and Ben, who knows? But listen, okay, Cinco de Mayo weekend, which is actually May the 4th. The undisputed middleweight champion of the world. Let's not, in this era of belt madness, and I do ignore a lot of it, let's embrace it when we can. That is an undisputed world champion. Defends against the undefeated Jaimie Munguia, who's coming off a stoppage win over John Ryder. You can get 9-2, I see. I always look at the Sky Bet. I've got that app on my phone. You can get 9-2 at this stage on Munguia. I've seen Adi Oladipo, I believe, who works for the Zone, was talking yesterday on the network, on the platform, and he said he believes that he will pull off the upset. He said, you heard it here first, Munguia to upset Canelo. I don't think so at this stage. I think the kid is useful. He's young. It might be an exciting fight. He comes forward. He throws a lot of punches, but I think he'll probably, while Canelo Alvarez is probably only about 70-75% of what he has been at this stage, perhaps, I think that Munguia may make him look quite good. You, though, who are great at picking upsets and thinking outside the box, I want to know what you think.
I was very quite amazed at Leonard Ellaby's dialogue. He said that he thinks it'll be a very easy fight for Canelo and that he's made to measure and he's getting knocked out Munguia. He said this is a made-to-measure, clever fight. He knows exactly what he's doing, Canelo. This is a made-to-measure fight, and he's going to knock him spark out. No issue whatsoever. I'll be putting considerable amount of money on it. So that's interesting. I don't know what he knows, if he knows any more than we do. I doubt it. But it all depends, Ben, on which Canelo shows up. The good Canelo beats him all day long. If he's on the slide, that's the issue, and that's why it's a tough one to call, because nobody knows till the night.
Well, so if you are on the slide and your well runs dry on a particular night, then maybe almost anybody can beat you, perhaps, when that happens. But I think, looking at, he hasn't fought. Inactivity might be another thing, Gary, because he hasn't fought since last September. He generally fights in September and May.
This Ian.
Go on. I thought you'd have a look at that. Go on. Get out.
No, yes, he was. Mr. Smart didn't go, and Barry took me. Yes, it was amazing, and we had a great laugh. Barry was Tony's son, and so me and Barry went, and it was like the best day of our life. And Mr. Smart was, I think he was 100% at the time. So me and Barry went, yeah, correct.
Still such a legendary moment for.
He knows that, yeah.
Still such a legendary.
Not a lot of people know that. That's like
you're getting like the silk. You're pretty good usually, Gary, as a camera professional. You don't normally jam at my kind of verbiage, but silk is brilliant. Yeah, that's very larger than like behaviour. That was so cute. But I was saying, before we get back to what we're talking about, that is still such an iconic moment for me to get the Stretch Collins thing, particularly since I couldn't find any footage for decades, and then you tipped me off to a little priceless little glimpse of it, which was how we started talking and created this, fantastic podcast and all the rest of it, and this relationship and all that. But what a moment that was. Raymond Hale says,
I would pay Ben to see the whole fight. If you see the whole fight, it's even more impressive than that, because it's that.
I would love to find it in its entirety. I really would. There's.
I walked out with my hands by my hips, laughing when the bell rang, and just did a complete, complete mugging of him. Yeah, it was terrible.
I asked Frank Warren how he felt about it once 10 years ago when we did an interview. I said, because that was supposed to be George Collins' final coronation before turning pro, and I asked him how he felt about that situation at the I think it was the Grosvenor House Hotel, and he said, well, I was quite disappointed because I said, why are you doing this? You don't need it, and you've already won the 10 amateur titles, and he said, but they didn't listen to me. So I think Frank probably did think, I'm not too sure about this one. This stretch from St Helens might be a banana skin, but will Munguia be a banana skin? Raymond Hale says he feels he's kind of made to order for Canelo. He says Canelo's just too skillful and experienced, and he comes to fight, and it works for Canelo. I think, see, that's what I think, Gary. I just don't see him. I don't see him outboxing Canelo, and I don't see him overpowering him or bombarding him either. So I think they're going to have a fight, aren't they? I just think it still favours Canelo at this stage.
I think at this stage I'll be on Canelo. I'm not sure yet, but I think
you don't have to make a pick until next week anyway. This is kind of an early kind of speculation.
I'll do a bit more research, but I'm pretty accustomed. I mean, I've seen Munguia on a few fights, impressive. Certainly did a better job than Canelo on Ryder. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be ultra up for it, but that could be his downfall against Canelo. If he's super up for it and you go to have a fight, it could be his downfall. But we'll see. I think Freddie Roach is pretty high on Munguia.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I think Canelo's not Canelo for no reason, like you say,
Yeah, and the thing is, activity could be another factor. Canelo tends to fight every September and May, and that's been his blueprint for a few years now. Having said that, he was quite active. He was a little bit more active a few years ago during the lockdown. Ironically, during the lockdown, he was pretty active. I remember him fighting 4 times, if memory serves, 1 year, including a gimme against Avni Yildirim and such. But like I say, he hasn't been in the ring, Canelo. He won't have been in the ring since September when he boxed Jamel Charlo in what was a disappointing fight. I was out there in Atlantic City with the Silk that night. We were watching it because we were there for the Hall of Fame celebration ceremony. And I was saying to the Silk, I did think Canelo looked very predictable at this point and quite pedestrian, although he won the fight in second gear because Charlo didn't come to fight. Canelo, his offensives looked also very readable and predictable. There was the hard left jab, there was that lead hook, the lead hook to the body, occasional right uppercut. He looked very he did look predictable. That's why I think the Silk fancies Terence Crawford to beat him if that ever comes to fruition. And as you know, he doesn't. Go on.
I think, Ben, Canelo not looking too great that night. However, it was a complete shutout. And then if you look at if you put it in context, do a complete shutout on Charlo, no matter what weight, is a pretty impressive win.
I understand what you're saying, but Charlo came with what looked like zero ambition.
I think he came for a massive amount of money and not to get embarrassed and to survive. Yeah. But had he come and got a surprise of a very on the slide Canelo, he could have got excited and tried. But I think he felt him out, felt he's no chance of getting anywhere with this guy, and so he just got on his bike and survived. So, but I think that's due to his probably experienced. Canelo was too good for him at the time. So I think he could have got inspired if he'd have felt Canelo wasn't, it was beatable, but he obviously felt he wasn't. So I think it's not really a fair assessment of Canelo because he had a complete shutout of one of the world's best fighters, even though it was a different weight. He made him look ridiculous, like a fucking chicken running for his life. So I think when you put it the levels, it was a pretty high level. And so I mean, I think we give Canelo a pass on that one, but he didn't look his best. We'll see. I think the fact that he's inactive, Ben, is a good thing at this stage of his career because I think he's the mileage and the rest to get up for 1 or 2 fights a year, sure, he can do it. But if he's getting up for 3 or 4, I think it'll be he's on burnout if he's on the slide for sure. So I think that suits him.
Yeah, I think you might be right there because it's all very well saying that inactivity and age can can coagulate in a way that isn't beneficial to a fighter. But you could equally argue you need to take it a little bit easier, your schedule, and give yourself more time to recover when you get older. So I know
And I
the
think
tilt once again. He doesn't feel he thinks that ring activity is overrated. Sometimes he doesn't think fighters have to get out there and have a bout or a tune up necessarily. He thinks you can do it all in the gym.
I
But
think it all depends on the stage of your career. I think as a young professional, you should be active and get the experience you need. But I think at the Canelo's point, 50 plus pro fights, I think you don't need to be super active. I think you need to fight at least once, twice a year. But I think as a young professional gaining the experience you need, I think you've got to be active, momentum. But I think as you develop and as you become certainly like a seasoned, I don't think there's a more seasoned pro than Canelo. I think for him, it's not going to be as effective as it would be for a young kid who's on his way up,
Yeah, and the other thing I think is, although Munguia is 43-0 and he's got the 34 knockouts, he hasn't exactly boxed a who's who of great opposition. Really, I mean, the names are like Kilrain Kelly, Spike O'Sullivan. I'm trying to think. Of obviously Ryder. Ryder was a decent result because people don't stop Ryder.
I think he
generally,
I think he got a very tenderized
Ryder.
rider.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there comes a point when you're ready for you're going in as the B side at that point as John Ryder, and it was he'd gone the distance with Canelo, but that must have taken a little bit out of him too because he took a beating from Canelo as well in Guadalajara. So I know Ryder is very durable, very strong, but there comes a point, like you say, I think tenderized is the perfect way to put it. So there's an element, I don't want to call it a padded record that Munguia has, but he doesn't have an absolutely. He hasn't had the opposition, which would necessarily make him ready for the test that's in front of him. Assuming Canelo is still on his game, So we both. So you're not going to be. You haven't committed yet, but I get the feeling you're not going to be predicting another one of those famous stretch upsets when we have this conversation next week.
No. And I think back to Munguia, Ryder, I think, had his last hurrah with Canelo, in the fact that I think he really must have got up for it, put everything he had in that camp. That was it. That was the pinnacle of his life. And I think when you come off a bad beating like that, I think mentally to even get up for another and a much lesser, even though he tries, I think something in his spirit was taken away. And I think he fought a much lesser Canelo than Canelo fought. A much lesser rider than Canelo fought.
Yeah.
I'm not super impressed with that win over Ryder. I don't think you compare the two. I don't think you can. I think the rider that fought Canelo would have been whatever he had left, absolutely left on the table. And so, no. But I think, coming into this new fight, I think that experience and as long as he's not gone, which I don't think he will have, I think Canelo's smart enough to know. I think he's got good people who would know too. I think he's picked Munguia. I don't believe in all this. The Mexican fighters, that's irrelevant. I believe he's picked the guy that he thinks is the best fight.
It can be exactly which, and following on from that, Raymond Hales has raised the question again. Do you think Canelo will fight Benavidez? If he ducks him, it will stay in his 12-stone legacy. Well, I don't know whether he'll fight him or not. I know for a fact he's not keen to fight him, and he doesn't feel. Canelo has a sense of entitlement at this point in his career, where he says, "I've earned the right to fight who I want and pick who I want to fight. I've done all the hard work. I've fought everybody, as far as he's concerned, So I know he doesn't want to fight Benavidez, and I know that the people around him and Canelo himself see that as an unattractive risk-reward proposition. Clearly. But despite the crazy offers that Samson Lekowitz, who manages Benavidez, was claiming Canelo had been offered by PBC, Al Heyman, to fight David Benavidez. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility of Canelo ever fighting Benavidez before he retires, but I wouldn't be at all sure. And I don't think it will. I'm not sure it will affect his legacy ultimately. I think people will forget that at some point if he doesn't fight him.
I think they're giving Benavidez far too much credit because all due respect, I don't rate him like everyone rates him. I think he's got so many holes in his game. and I honestly think Canelo would destroy him. But I honestly believe in my heart of hearts, and I'm not a Canelo fan. I mean, I respect Canelo, I like him, but I'm not an avid fan. Like, I honestly believe in my heart of hearts. Just imagine you're Canelo. Like, he's fought them all, right? He's fought. I mean, when you fought Golovkin 3 times, you're not fucking afraid of Benavidez. Trust me. But, you know, certainly, no way, shape, or form. But I honestly believe he's at a time in his life. He doesn't like Benavidez. I think he's got a lot of history with Benavidez slagging him off. He doesn't want to give him a payday. He doesn't want to do anything.
The old Ricky Hatton Jr. Whitter thing dynamic.
I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that is I don't think he's slightly afraid of Benavidez. I think he's saying, I ain't giving you fuck all. Go and get your payday somewhere else, because you're not getting a payday with anybody else. Not like you're going to get with Canelo. And I think that is the motivation for Canelo, is just you've opened your mouth too much. Like, I think that Munguia is an easier fight, and he's probably picked it smartly. But I also believe that he thinks Munguia talked at the press conference, said they asked him about fighting Canelo. He said, he's my hero. I looked up to him as a kid. I want to be like him. Today I want to be like. I think Canelo thinks
fighting talk, eh?
No, but he's like, he's a nice kid, and give him a payday, give him a shot. You know, I think I think when you get to the stage where Canelo's at now, crazy money, done it all, doesn't need to do anything other than what he wants to. And I personally think he doesn't want to out of personal issues with Benavidez. But I believe if it's pushed to a degree, I think he'll beat him, he'll fight him, and he'll beat him, and he'll beat him well.
It's interesting when Raymond asks, will it affect his legacy, or will he actually suggests it will stain his legacy if he doesn't fight Benavidez?
Depends on Benavidez. If Benavidez gets knocked out in his next fight, it won't affect his legacy at all.
Well, there you go.
If Benavidez goes on to be a 5-weight champion and reigns supreme for 10 years, maybe they'll say Canelo abduct him. It all depends. Benavidez got to prove himself.
What I was going to look at in the wider context, if you look historically at people, what legacies actually have been lastingly affected by the accusation of a duck? And if we run it back, I'll go back to the 1920s. Jack Dempsey, sometimes accused of ducking Harry Greb, all right, who, as you know, was a legendary middleweight. Some people say Greb was the greatest fighter ever lived, but there's no footage of him. So certainly someone like a larger, they would say, well, I can't see him. So if he can't see him, he can't be the greatest. But, you know,
Tyson ducked Lennox 100%. I was around at the time because I remember Lennox made about, I think twice they paid Lennox over 10 million twice. Step aside. Because they said the Holyfield fight was a bigger draw and this was this. But at the end of the day, Mike fought Holyfield because he thought he was a light heavyweight and he would overpower him.
Well, come on, cruiserweight. Let's be fair, cruiserweight.
Yeah, there you go, Ben. And then the second time he had to fight him, he had to out of it. He got embarrassed to fight him. Otherwise, he you know, because what happened, he had to do it again. But no, I think Lennox was avoided by quite a few. But yeah, I don't think Benavidez is even.
Well, we're not talking about Benavidez anymore. We know that you don't forget. Neither do I. Now we're going on this little segue about people legacy affecting ducks in people's.
Well, let's look at. We could look at. I disagree, but people talk about Joe Calzaghe saying he avoided the greats, but I don't know if that is. Is that because he couldn't get him out of fucking.
What they say is he fought Hopkins and Jones when they were in their dotage. Jones, I mean, Hopkins was still a fine fighter, and I don't even know.
But Joe was shot too.
Huh?
Joe was shot too. Joe had no hands left then.
Well, he wasn't shot, but he was not. He was perhaps not in his prime. You know, I mean, if you look at the Lacey fight, was 2006. Okay, right? It was 2006, and he fought Roy Jones in what 2008? Did he? And he fought Hopkins in 2007, I believe, right? Or maybe it was 2008, that fight as well. But regardless, the knock against him is that he didn't fight them until they were tenderized and ripe, you know. But I don't think that works with the Hopkins fight, because I think Hopkins, I don't even know when Bernard's prime was. He's such an anomaly. I don't even think you can say he was past his prime then, but Bernard is an absolute freak of nature. Roy was definitely 1 foot in the grave, fistically. Look
at the bullshit to talk about Floyd. When Floyd fought Mayweather, he was in his almost 40.
Pacquiao, you mean?
No, Mayweather, when he fought Canelo, and they said he
Yeah.
fought a young Canelo was 43-0. That's not like a kid.
I
He
know
was.
exactly that. It's like same as Munguia now. I know, yeah. This and that
It's
was
not
a
like
major,
he
major
was he
performance.
was he was he was right. He was green. He was 43-0 when, and Floyd was way past his best.
I don't know, way past his best, but he
He was
was not
past
at
his
his best. He
best.
can't have been. I mean,
No,
you'd think regardless of whether he was past his best or not, he was 37, right? I believe. Or no, 39. 39.
there you go, Ben. Come on, that's 10 years past your prime, right?
Well, it might not be because I don't think Hopkins was that much past his prime when he fought Joe. See, this is the thing. Silk's got another one as well. The contrary, he says Roberto Duran was not at his prime as a lightweight. Everybody says he was, right? He says no, he wasn't. The prime is about the convergence of your emotional, psychological, and physical attributes, and blah 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 and blah. And he says so. He says Duran was not at his prime as a lightweight. Now, obviously, the entire boxing world will disagree with him forever. But he's got this interesting idea that we can't set it. I agree with him. At least you can't set it at an age. You know what I mean? Because you get smarter when you get older, right? You get smarter, so it's a trade-off.
Of course. But I mean, anyone who has had any access to boxing in the past 50 years would say Duran was one of the greatest lightweights of all time.
Well, he may have been the greatest lightweight of all time,
May
but
have
there's
been.
no way.
So,
There's no way on earth he's one of the greatest at any of the other weights. You know, there's no way he's the greatest welterweight of all time and middleweight, is there? So you know.
no. So I don't know what Silk's on, but I love Silk's brain. But on this one, I think he's off base.
And you know what it comes down to as well, Gary? I suspect he hasn't seen a whole bunch of Duran's lightweight fights. I bet you he'll look at the Davey Moore fight and say that was beautiful poetic destruction, which it was, and then he'll run with that and say possibly that maybe that 154 was his prime, or maybe his prime came a little bit later than the 1970s, shall we say? You could say his absolute prime night was versus Sugar Ray Leonard in June 1980, couldn't you? You could argue that. You could say that was the best he ever. That was the most formidable version of Duran ever. I wouldn't have an issue with that. But in boxing, don't we look at prime retrospectively? We certainly do, Raymond. I would say. Jonathan O'Halloran says Hopkins was world champion at 49.50. It's unbelievable. Calzaghe doesn't seem to get the credit for beating Hopkins. Yeah, I agree with that. Hopkins was 43 and in great shape when Joe beat him. The only thing I would say is some people think Joe lost. I didn't. I thought Joe nicked it, but it was an ugly fight. It was an ugly, stultifyingly boring fight. Those two.
Yeah, I mean,
Hopkins.
Joe's fights were messy because that was Joe's style. He was fast. He was, flurries, and some people say pitter patter sometimes, but Eubanks said to me after one round he thought he couldn't beat Calzaghe. So he
got put over in the first round, which kind of helped his confidence.
Yeah, but I think just the style and maybe the awkwardness and the unconventionalness of him. I think Calzaghe was one of these fighters that he was not better than he looked, but more difficult. I think when you get in with him, you would say, "Well, I'm in with a nightmare." I think he might not have looked so awkward, but I've fought guys in the past who they don't look anything, but you get in with them, they're so awkward, it's so difficult, and I think Calzaghe was probably one of them.
I think he probably was, the thing is, Joe is a legitimately great fighter. I mean, I recently got a bunch of casuals frothing at the mouth because I saw a YouTube video that was entitled "Joe Calzaghe, the most underrated champion in history," and I just said absolute bollocks. No way on earth is he the most underrated, and I got a load of Calzaghe fans turning on me because they didn't understand
I don't think
the premise.
I don't think he's underrated, Ben, but he's not overrated at all. I mean, he's well deserved of the applaud he got. He could have got a little bit more, I think, because
when he was active, yeah.
I think, but I don't think he was underrated at all. I think that his biggest victories did come under a slight bit of shade with age and whatever on both sides.
Well, not the Jeff Lacey one, right? If anybody discredited the Jeff Lacey one, they said, "Oh, maybe Lacey was a hype job," but that's not fair.
Well, I love Calzaghe. He's a friend. I have a personal friendship, so I'm not biased, but I really think he's a good man. He's a beautiful person. However, no question, and if Joe sleeps and wakes up with a clear head and asks himself a fundamental question, and he's really honest, there's no way, shape, or form that Joe would ever beat prime Roy Jones.
I tend to think you're right. I mean, you know what? I,
I mean,
in
that's just the
fairness,
reality.
in fairness, I will
I don't know who
say
would.
at least. In fairness, at least I will say I wouldn't write Joe off, but I very much feel the way you feel about that because Roy Jones was on another planet back then. And Joe, and I don't suppose he did want to. And the thing with Joe, funny enough, I interviewed Joe at Gray's Civic Hall in 2015. It was an evening with Joe Calzaghe, Lee Eaton, who's now making big waves in professional boxing and managing fighters, and he's involved in promoting shows. He brought Joe Calzaghe to Essex, and he got me to do the interview with him on stage. And at some point, I said, "So Joe, you finally beat Roy Jones in 2008." I said, "But if you guys had fought anywhere up to 5 to 8 years earlier, not many people would have picked you to win, would they?" And he just looked at me and said, on stage with the audience there, and he said, "Hang about, mate. This is a bloody Joe Calzaghe night, not a Roy Jones tribute." But
Yeah.
and then he gave me a hug and said, "I'm only joking, mate."
No, I think like I could say prime Hopkins, prime Joe. I still think Joe could have outboxed him, out overwhelmed him with the flurries. I think he could
Work
have
rate, yeah.
work rate. The problem and the difference with Roy Jones is Roy Jones was an instinctual, reactive, a bit like the Haney Garcia's left hook. Roy Jones had the instinctual every shot in the book. His reactions and his instincts were insane.
Yeah.
So it does affect him greatly when he goes over his prime because he's not like a fundamental stand-up
Like
boxer.
Hopkins was. Yeah.
Yes, where you can rely on the structure, the technique. That's not Roy. Roy was shots from everywhere, every angle, incredible instincts, incredible trigger shots. So when you pass your prime, you're very much.
You McIlvenny said that the guys like Leonard, Ali, and Roy Jones, the reason why their declines were so radical, he said, is because once those reflexes had gone to a degree, they had no orthodox method to hide behind.
Yeah, I think Ray Leonard less than the other two. I think Leonard had a pretty good structural boxing.
Yeah, he was. I think he had more core fundamentals actually.
More structure
Right?
than Roy and the others, but no, Roy.
Yeah, he did.
You take the fundamentals from Roy, which is complete instinct and reaction speed, away from him. Then it's greatly diminished.
Yeah. You know what? After the Canelo fights, which will be Saturday night in America and Sunday morning in the UK, there will be Naoya Inoue, the undisputed super bantamweight champion of the world, will be defending against Lewis Neary at the Tokyo Dome. That's on a Monday. The great thing for UK viewers about Inoue fights is you get them at a really civilized hour in the morning. For people who have not got, I guess if you've got a day job and you have to be at it and you're not your own boss, might be a bit awkward. But you can watch it at about midday usually in the UK, something like that. The main event. So that's coming up. And this is another one. I mean, I know the Silk's not here tonight, but I'm kind of bringing him here in some kind of form by talking about some of his positions on certain fighters and certain things in boxing. He's not as convinced about Inoue as everybody else is. I suspect he just doesn't, once again, hasn't paid much. I think it's more of an American bias thing because Silk is American domiciled, even if he's not by birth. Because every time I cite Inoue as one of the best fighters in the world at any weight, he asks me why all the time and tries to get me to justify it, like it's not already a given. But I don't know, what's your take on the little Japanese marvel?
I think he's amazing. Yeah.
Isn't he though?
Yeah. Got everything.
He's
smart, punching power, quick, good IQ,
defense,
aggressive, got decent defense. He's got everything. Yeah.
It reminds me of a very kind of destructive miniature Donald Curry in some ways because he's so efficient.
Very, very, very good. I tell you what I liked on the undercard, Ben, the other night. Is it Morton?
Kamel Morton, who's Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s little protege.
Yeah, he looked fantastic, even though he fought a very tough kid who was unbeaten. and he didn't look like he had the biggest punching power, Morton, but he was so well rounded and so he looks like if he develops a little bit, he looked like Floyd, you know.
Yeah, he's Floyd Mayweather's protege. They've been shouting him out for a few years now.
He
He's
looks
very
great,
young, I believe. Like I think he's 18 years old, but
great.
he is being groomed for stardom for sure.
He's amazing. He had everything and grit, and he didn't mind, banging it out when he had to, and the condition. He threw a million shots for 8 rounds and never tired, and like major. I mean, he looked so structurally and fundamentally rounded. He was very impressive.
Major fight to watch. Yeah, I must admit I didn't see him box on the
The
New
one thing
York film, but
the
I'll have a
one
look.
thing you'll question is his punching power, but I think it was. I think he fought a very, very game tough. The kid was unbeaten, and he Morton hit him with everything, and never really hurt the kid. But so I said, can he bang or can he not? But I think he can. I just think he fought a very underrated. I mean, it wasn't underrated. They were both unbeaten, and they were both highly respected. The two of them. It was a bit of a not a risky fight, but if they see him going where they see him going, he had to beat this guy, and he beat him. But it was. The guy was incredibly brave and hung into the end and caught Morton a lot to his credit, but he showed a bit of everything this morning. It was a great fight for learning for a prospect, and
That's the way there should be these fights. If you're a super talented kid like that, you should be having these relatively testing hard fights coming up, right? Instead of just because in the UK, I've been going to a few shows recently again, in the capacity of covering them for us. I get accreditation on the basis of Sugar, Silk, and Stretch lately at the shows, and you see these journeymen that these up and coming kids face. Like it happens to them all, but the Colin McMillan's got a young protege called Billy Adams, who's now 3-0, and he's had 3 journeymen. And I remember Steve Bunce commenting on the fight and saying, and he'll have maybe 10 of those, like it's an accepted format and we shouldn't be bothered about that. But sometimes it is a bit of a pointless exercise, I feel. I mean, obviously, it gets them used to selling tickets and boxing under the TV lights and, in front of get some experience and get some professional bouts on their record. But,
in fairness, Ben, I think we know that structure of get the 10 bodies up for your first 10 in England, because I think we don't have the amateur background of a lot of the Americans and some of the Eastern Europeans who've had 300 amateurs. There's not a lot of guys I know who've had 200 amateurs, 300 amateurs, like Lomachenko,
like some of the Americans have. Yeah, for sure.
And I think when you've had that kind of experience, they can fast track them a lot quicker. Whereas the English, a lot of them, they get them pretty young. They might win 1 ABAs, and the English mentality is let's turn now while I'm hot rather than lose next year. And so they turn over with maybe 30, 40 fights and they guide them into the pro rank. So I think it's a bit different. I think the Americans with 200 plus amateur fights, they can fast track them a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. I mean, I think, see, people always say, and sometimes I think there's a kind of virtue signaling involved in this. Before I say it, I've got the greatest respect for journeymen. I know many journeymen personally over the last several years, and they are highly, they're men that demand respect. They are tough, slippery veterans who do something that a lot of people couldn't do. But when the virtue signalling fans who want to seem kind of hip say, "Oh, they're the backbone of the game. Without them, there'd be no champions," I don't necessarily agree with that because the amateur game doesn't need journeymen to create Olympic champions and world champions and ABA champions. They use competition as the model to create those champions. 50-50 competition right the way through, pretty much. So I'm not sure that we do. I think we have journeymen, and I respect them because and they're much better than their record. Always are. But I'm not convinced we actually need them. I think we have them in this imperfect world, and they're important to the ecosystem we have now. I don't accept that there is not another way of doing things, and there never has been. You know what I mean?
I think that I think what they are used for, Ben, to be honest, is to give promoters a stable of fighters that they can make money with by building their records to 10-0 and 12-0, more so than giving the promoters a better fighter. You know what I mean? They're giving them exposure, they're giving them knockouts, they're giving them they're giving them, they're building a
Well,
following.
Gary, they're not normally giving them knockouts because the whole thing like
No,
Journeymen
no,
is
of course,
you
yes.
never stop them. You hardly ever stop them. Not the good ones. Never.
Yeah, no, I thought,
Or a Nassim Hamed might stop them, and they'll be like, "Oh wow!"
well, I
But
stopped.
generally, they don't get stopped.
If you look at my record, Ben, I stopped most of them. You know, I had a couple.
But were they Journeymen or also rounds? Because
No,
today,
they were, you know, everyone had fought them, because I remember looking at the record, and my peers before me had fought him, and I was judging how much quicker I knocked him out or slower I knocked him out on my record. Like, I would gauge, well, he knocked him out in 3, I knocked him out in 2, or, you know, it was that kind of
because
thing.
these days nobody knocks them out. They all go to distance. This kid Billy Adams, he can probably punch a bit, but he's 3-0 with three decision wins because it was a bit different when you were fighting, Gary. I think today it really is this thing where they turn up and they go 4 rounds. Honest to God,
Well,
the defendable ones.
Ben, it's very difficult to beat someone who doesn't try and win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
when
yeah.
they
To
throw
stop them, yeah.
when they throw the offense, when they throw shots, they become open, so you can knock them out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
If they shot, it's very difficult to break them. You know.
And what you'll see is, especially a kid on his debut who's all keyed up and he's got a bit of stardust on him, and people are saying this guy's one to watch. He did this and that in the amateurs. You can see them try, and they've got a noisy throng of fans who don't know what's going on. They don't know what the deal is, and you'll see the kid trying to stop him for 3 rounds and really loading up, and you'll see the guy, the journeyman, tucking up and ducking and diving and holding and turning. And then you see in the 4th round, the kid will think, I ain't going to stop this guy. I might as well relax and just enjoy it, because you can't stop this fucker because he's hardly throwing any punches back. You know,
Yeah,
he's just hiding.
They know every trick in the book to survive, because, as you know, Ben, they box as a job, like not to be a champion. And as you know, if you get knocked out, you get stopped. You have to have
suspension.
2 months suspension, scan, but it costs more than they earn. So they're very, very cautious. And yeah, if they don't want to get knocked out, most of them don't get knocked out, you know?
Exactly. So my only point was, I'm not convinced when people, because you get, like I say, people saying, "Oh, journeymen, they're the lifeblood of the game." It's a bit like when sometimes people try to say it's a hipster desire. You know, they say, "I prefer to go to a good small hall show," and it's like, well, small hall shows are the worst in this era. In the 21st century, small hall shows suck most of the time. I'm sorry to any small hall promoters of my acquaintance and friends, or people who might be watching, and obviously there's exceptions, but small hall shows are the most cynical, most rigged, effectively rigged of the lot nowadays. I'd say it'd be interesting, Gary. I don't know when the last time it was that you went to a small hall show at the York Hall, for instance, somewhere like that. But it might be interesting for you to see how it has changed since your day when you were on the circuit. But
York Hall used to be a classic venue, you know,
and it still is. But I'm saying sometimes that a lot of the small hall shows. I remember Brian John, who is an amateur coach for Haringey ABC, and he's also a referee and official, very respected man in amateur boxing. It was him and Terry Kelly who inaugurated the very successful and popular Haringey Box Cup that goes on every summer at the Ali Pally. And he was saying sometimes he's all about the amateurs, and he always has been all about the amateurs. But he will sometimes go to support a pro fighter who used to be one of his amateurs, or someone he used to know in the amateurs, usually an ex-Haringey boy or girl nowadays. Okay, and then every time he goes, he always he says, "Yeah, great, you know, a lot of fun. This, you know, tickets cost like 50 quid. It was £7 for half a lager at the bar, and you could predict the cut. You could predict the winners on the cut on the left hand side in your sleep." He goes, "What's not to love? When's the next one?" You know. But, the point being that you can pick the results of these small hall shows. They're very cynical nowadays. You know what I mean? And I've seen stuff. I've had fighters at that level, you know, who were just turning pro, and you get journeyman even saying, I had one guy, right, he made his debut, yeah, and the opponent fell out the day before, whatever. So we needed another one. So the promoter, not the promoter, it was a Spencer Fearon promotion actually, right, at the XL in Docklands. But Mickey Helliott had a fighter, and Mickey Helliott's a reasonably well-known manager promoter as well, and he said, I'll call such and such. And he called him in the morning and said, do you want to fight this afternoon? It was an afternoon show, okay, Saturday afternoon. And he was planning to go to a barbecue, this guy. And he'd never won a fight, by the way. He'd had about 30 fights and he'd lost them all, but he'd mostly gone the distance. I won't say his name, I won't say the fighter's name. But anyway, he gets the call in the morning. He was supposed to be going to a barbecue that afternoon. He hadn't trained for weeks. And he said, yes, okay, I'll take it. Because you're getting £1,000, aren't you? 1,200 quid maybe, tops. So he turned up. Now, the problem was my fighter was 10 stone 10, okay? At the venue, it was 10 stone 10. This guy was 12 stone 2. And the border control were not entirely comfortable with it. And they were saying, oh, don't know about this. And what do you reckon? And all the rest of it. And we just wanted to fight. And the guy looked at me. He didn't say it in front of the border control, but he just looked at me and said, honestly, I'm just going to move around. Don't worry. I'm just going to move around. And then, so my guy goes out and wins the first 2 rounds. The other guy starts doing a bit better in the 3rd round. And later on, the other guy who I've mentioned his name once, I won't mention it again. He said, I told him, I said, be careful. You won that round. Ease off a bit. You know, that is how cynical it is in this era. That was back in, I think it was 2012. Okay. So that is the way the industry is these days, which I don't know if does that ring any bells to you, or does it sound a little bit more severe?
When I had my last fight, I fought a guy called, I can't remember. It was a Brendan Ingle fighter.
Yeah, you know, again at the Brixton Academy, right?
And I went and he weighed in like much heavier than me. He was a last minute replacement, right?
Yeah, same thing, right?
Much heavier. And I was so pissed off. And my dad said, we're not doing it, because it was like every time I got fucked on people weight or this. Even at my last fight, I got so much weight. And I said, and Brendan came to me, he said, God, don't worry, we're just going to move around.
Same thing.
But I knew Brendan was hustling me because he tried to beat me, the guy, although he was very limited, strong. But Brendan says, yeah, we'll just fuck about. But Brendan was hustling me because he was trying to get me to, get knocked out, because he thought the guy was strong and tough. But I'll never forget that the opposing corner come to me and said, can I have a word with you? I said, yeah. He said, guys, we're just going to fuck about. Don't worry. And I thought, wow. But that he wasn't trying to fuck about, but Brendan just wanted to get the job on and, get his guy a fight. But I'm not sure if he thought he could beat me or not, but they didn't try and fuck him. They came to win. But I was shocked that actually happened to me. Someone said, we just move around. I was like, no.
And I've got other examples. You know, I could give you more examples than that, Gary, where it was blatantly. Do you know what I mean? It's not fixed in that Guy Ritchie go down in a 4 for all cutcha kind of thing. It's nothing to do with that. It's just a business arrangement, and people, and it happens. The white collar scene is very much like that. A lot of the time, whereby it almost imitates professional boxing at its worst. At the lowest rung. But you know what? It's still the greatest sport in the world when everything is right about it. When you get the great fights and it all comes together, and it's that beautiful, savage poetry of it all. So I don't want to get too down on it, but it is quite demystifying getting involved.
Every sport's got its good and bad, Ben. You know that. This is just.
I know, but none of them. I don't know any of them that's as hooky as boxing. Do you? To be fair, I'm not intimately acquainted with other sports, but I find it hard to imagine that tennis is anything like. Remember when Eubank said there are too many skullduggers in this game? I don't imagine tennis has the same equivalent amount of skullduggers. Do you? Although I know that girl got hit with a hammer, right? Once, Tonya Harding, was it? So they have their stories too.
They have the
horse
moments.
racing.
They have the moments, but I think boxing, the nature of the sport brings in the nature of the people involved, and they're normally a little bit like this. I think it is what it is. But that's part of the fun of it for me. Beating the system was fun for me. Or trying. I never quite beat it all, but I beat some of it. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the seediness of boxing is part of the glamour and the appeal, isn't it? Because that's why it's always appealed to filmmakers, and because the sport, as noble as it is, in certain ways, it is endlessly seedy, but fascinating for all that,
Yeah, and I think that's the intrigue about the game. There's a lot of colourful characters in the boxing game, and they come from all walks of life. But there's something, like Ben, which is why we always say it's the greatest sport in the world. There's something about it's like poker. Poker. Phil Ivey's a friend of mine. He's the world's best poker player, So
Yeah.
arguably the world's best. He's won like 10 World Series and many others. He's got countless bracelets. But he said there's nothing quite like what's fascinating about it. It's green, it's money, it's you're playing for real money. When he goes and plays a cash game with someone, he puts up 5 million of his own money. It's like
Yeah.
it's pure adrenaline. You know, it's no bullshit, no dialogue. It's money on the table. So it's like it all the buck ends here. The fight game's the same. When you're gonna have a fight with someone, there's no hiding. It's all of the bullshit goes out the window. When the bell rings, it's on. It's pure. And no matter who you are, what you know, or what you know, it's what you record on the night. It's you'll get found out or you won't. And so there's something fascinating about it, and a truthness about it. This, you know, being truthful. There's no hiding, and I think that's a fascinating thing about it. I think actors, if you know, it's funny. All boxers want to act lately. I think, and all actors want to box. Because the
Yeah.
actors try and be truthful in imaginary circumstance, if that's the definition. But
Yeah.
I think they're fascinated with the reality of real life drama, which happens in a boxing ring. It's real life drama where the stakes are unforgiving.
You just give me a flashback to a moment many years ago when I was watching a particular big British fight on television with my dad. And just as the two fighters were in the ring and were going through their little kind of machinations and rituals and movements, as the MC was starting to take up the mic, he said to me, "There's nothing quite like this, is there?" You know what? You know what the fight was? Chris Eubank versus Gary Stretch. I
Ah.
remember in the flat in Richmond, Sheen Road, Richmond, and he said, "There's nothing quite like this, is there?"
Yeah. No,
And that
it's funny
was,
because I even remember, Ben, more so than the Eubanks fight, a few fights when I was walking out and I had this thought come in my head, like it's on, like there's no turning back now.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know, you know, you get like on a couple of occasions, not many, but I got this realization, like, hey, it's on, and it's a funny feeling, Ben. Yeah, you know it, you've done it, you've had it. Whether it's amateur, whether it's pro, whether it
yeah,
be
yeah,
top level, minimum level, whether it's in the street car park when someone or in the pub when they say let's step outside, when you've actually both walk out the door, it's on, right? It's like it's a very sobering feeling,
yeah, yeah.
and a lot of people have never experienced it, and they are the people knowing me of the big mouths and the bullshit. I remember that some bully in my neighborhood. I was with my trainer, my old trainer, Albert Freeman, and some idiot in a pub was causing havoc, and Albert said, "Steady down." And this guy said to Albert, "Shut your fucking mouth." And he said, "I've never been knocked out in my life." And Mr. Freeman said, "That's why you're talking the way you talk, sunshine."
Yeah,
He
yeah,
said,
exactly. Yeah,
"I
yeah,
have." He said, "But he said tonight might be different. Do yourself a favor, shut your fucking mouth." He said, "That's why you talk the way you talk, because you've never been knocked out. But it'll happen." Anyway, the guy looked at him and he got the message. But yeah, it's when you've been up, climbed up them steps, takes a certain breed of person, you know.
absolutely. And I always say that even to the white collar guys and girls, when they go through that, they say you've now entered into an exclusive family, an exclusive club of people who know what that feels like. You know, and some of them, to be honest, I think sometimes they've got even more guts because they don't have the skills and the experience. Really, they've had a bit of a crash course. Some of them, and they still get up there, and they don't know what's going to happen, do they? And you know, so all respect to them. But
You know, I can imagine, Ben. It's a little bit like armed forces. You know,
well,
I think
God, yeah,
I can you imagine. I mean, 10 times what we're doing. I got a
I
mate. I
God knows
got.
how that feels.
I have a mate, Binch, who has his own podcast, and he has a great podcast. And I did it with him. He's a brilliant guy, and you know, he's done active service and like full on the fucking shit. Makes me look like an idiot, but I can't imagine when it's really full on that they're shooting bullets at you, shooting them
God
back.
knows. I mean, and that puts it in perspective because sometimes as ex boxers, I mean, I always say I didn't do anything like the level you and Michael did, but you always say, no, you know, you can come with us
I
on this one. You can
disagree.
have
I
it first.
really do
But
honestly disagree. It's the same,
but
Ben, any level.
but yeah, but when we talk about that, and we sometimes there's always another level, I guess, because when we talk about, you know, these guys wouldn't know, they've never taken a punch in the face in their lives, so what do they know? And fair enough, just loudmouths. And then you think, like you say, people have been in a war zone. You think, my God, I mean, what? Because I remember there was a fella who said he used to listen to that Bill Conti, you know, the Rocky Four soundtrack and the instrumentals and stuff. He listened to that before he went into battle in this crazy. It was a relatively recent war situation of the last maybe 10 or 15 years. And you think, imagine, I mean, I would listen to the Rocky theme to get myself psyched up for an amateur fight or something. Imagine listening to it ahead of going into a
Exactly.
firefight with incredibly powerful weapons.
No, knowing really, I mean, the odds of us not getting out the ring, Ben, is of course there's a risk, but it's not huge.
It's
Uh,
pretty small, yeah. It's pretty small.
yeah, I mean, you'd have to be unfortunate or have some underlying condition, maybe. But for these guys, it's an absolute reality that they might not come home, you know, and
Yeah.
so uh, and even walking through places that they've already conquered with landmines, and you know, it's like there's no shortness of real danger, and so they are fucking heroes, these guys, and it does put it all into context, you know.
Absolutely, it does. You know, so we all need to acknowledge a level that we haven't been to. You know, sometimes,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but I reckon that's probably about a wrap. It's always a nice show when there's only two of us, or even only two of you. That we did that once, and that worked too. It is easy, isn't it? There's something about the three of us. Everybody becomes a lot more, I don't know, volatile and anxious to get their point across. It's nice when there's just two of us on the screen. Not that perhaps we're at our best when there's three of us, but that's always a harder gig to manage. It always is.
Well, at
So
least you're not laughing at the beginning.
yeah, because we used to get that. You and Silk had this kind of disruptive classroom thing going on, you know, and I
I
was the
played
teacher.
that. I played that to someone the other day. They were crying, laughing. I had to find it. I was looking on your pet.
Yeah,
I said, "Where's this opening?" I said, and they said, "Who's the serious one?" I said, "Oh." I said, "He's not serious, Ben, but he's just trying to hold the show together." I said, "We've just opened the show, and then off we've
yeah,
gone. And Ben's left, trying to kind of pull what little dignity he has left to
yeah,
continue the show, and me and Michael are just
yeah.
gone."
Well, the
But anyway.
Silk went through a stage of deliberately disrupting it, but he will be back next week to disrupt it some more, no doubt. So,
Are
guys,
we? Oh, so it's Friday next week, and what is that going to look at then?
well, that will be the eve of the Canelo fight, and we can also look at the, you know, and do you know what? Silk intimated that we may have a guest on Friday. Donny Lalonde has a fighter called Malik something that Donny Lalonde trains. He's a world ranked light heavyweight, and he was saying we could get Donny's fighter on Friday. Which I think the trouble with the Silk is he doesn't consult and say, "What about this, guys?" He says we can do this on Friday. He says then we'll get Alton Murchison on Sunday. So let's see what happens if we get a guest on Friday. Let's do that and also look at the Canelo fight. And at least we did it now as well. You know, so we've covered a lot of that ground already.
Right.
And then Alton Murchison hopefully will be on Sunday. And you know, and if you're that close friends with Joe Calzaghe, why don't you ask him too? I used to have his number. He does vaguely know me, but I've lost it. It's not in my new phone. So should we try and get Super Joe?
I can call Joe for sure. Now that I'm in
Let's,
Europe, it'll work too. Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
I'll call Joe definitely. Find out if you have someone on Sunday, if or Friday. If not, I'll try and get Joe on if he's around.
We could try and get Joe Friday and tell Silk that the other guy will have to wait. With all due respect,
Oh,
but yeah,
I'll call
put the
Joe
feelers out.
tomorrow. I'll call Joe
But
tomorrow.
okay, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Watch this space. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting us. We really appreciate you. And we will be back next Friday with or without Joe Calzaghe. Be lucky. Keep punching.